5 of his other rangers. That's why he's called the Lone Ranger. And he would go around with his main man, Tonto, and they would try to rid evil all around their area in Texas. One particular episode, the Lone Ranger, with his black mask on, is surrounded by another tribe of indigenous American people. And he's afraid because he doesn't know them. And he looks at Tonto and says, "What are we going to do now?" Tonto says, "White man, what you mean by we?" Tonto said, it gives us a lesson that just because somebody is by your side, that don't mean they're on your side.
Yeah.
Just because you have somebody in your camp, it doesn't mean that they're in your corner.
That's right.
And we have to understand that sometimes people will be with us until it gets hard.
Yeah.
They'll serve but until it gets hard. But we have to have this idea, ushers, that we're in this together through the good times, through the bad times, when it's packed, when it's empty, because we're not serving an audience, we're serving God.
All right.
I'm preaching already, ain't I?
Yes.
And I like how Frankie Beverly puts it. Frankie Beverly says, joy, pain. I knew y'all knew more than I love to praise the Lord. Sunshine and rain. And Frankie Beverly trying to get us to understand, no matter the circumstances, your calling has to be specific and you have to be consistent all the time. And when we struggle, we got to realize that we have to depend on one another. We have to share with one another because we're in this together. First Baptist in Antioch and Siloam and Ebenezer and every church gathered here today, we have to connect with one another because we make each other stronger.
Amen.
None of us has all the answers. None of us knows what's happening all the time. But if we stick together, we can make an impact wherever we are. Do I have a witness this morning?
Amen.
We're in this together. This passage we find in Hebrews. Hebrews is one of the most beautifully written books in our canon, in our Bible. It goes throughout chapters 1 through 10 beautifully about the supremacy of Christ and how Jesus is our high priest. And it gets real intellectual and it can be deep for some of us to comprehend. But what I love about it in chapter 10, verse 24, 25, it stops from giving us theology to give us some good practical steps. Because it don't matter how smart you are, if don't nobody understand you, you might be a fool to everybody else. And this book stops in these verses that you have chosen this morning to give some good practical advice. This anonymous writer lets us know that we ought to consider how to stir one another up into good works and love. I'm going to give you 3, then I'm going to flee. Is that all right this morning? First of all, we're in this together, then we get informed. When we're in this together, we can get informed. There was a plane riding, and if you've ever been on a plane ride, you're always nervous when the pilot gets on the radio. You just want them to get you where you're going. Charles Booth said, every good flight is one that goes up and comes back down. So you don't want no surprises when you're up in the air.
Yeah.
And on one flight, the captain says, we're 30,000 feet flying. No turbulence. Sun is shining. But we do have one problem. We've been flying in the wrong direction for the last 5 hours. I thought about that, and it says we'll never get to the right destination if we have the wrong information.
Right.
Let me say that again just in case you didn't get it. You'll never get to the right destination when you have the wrong information. And when you look in our world, it's full of wrong information. If we watch the news, we'll think that knucklehead, y'all's president, is running things. That's the wrong information. Racism, wrong information. Sexism, wrong information. And we got to come together to get informed, to let us know that we all been created and made beautiful in the image of God. That when we look at each other's faces, we don't just see each other, we see the very image of God. And we got to get informed. And the writer says we get informed by stirring one another. I like that one. Stirring. challenging, provoking, motivating each other into first love. We gotta love each other. You know, when you don't like each other, you gotta love each other.
Amen.
And it says we have to love one another. Jesus said they'll know that you're my disciples, not by how well you shout, or how well you preach, or how well you deacon, even how well you usher. They'll know you're my disciples by the love you have for each other. Because it's not about how high you jump, it's can you walk it out when you come back down.
All right now.
Stirring each other. I like this stirring. I used to, back in the day when I was a kid, I'm a 6th generation Baptist preacher. So they made us go to church all the time. No, y'all didn't hear me. I said all the time. We had 3 services on Sunday. Monday, spiritual hour. Tuesday, chatter makers. That's the old folks' home. 2 Bible studies on Wednesday. Mass choir rehearsal, senior choir rehearsal, kids rehearsal, whoever sang rehearsal. I said, man, I made up in my mind. I got a job at Burger King at 14. I said, schedule me every Sunday. When I got a car, I couldn't wait to drive by the church. Who would have thought I'd wind up doing this? Can't be playing with God. And they used to take us to these Sunday school union meetings. And we would have a banquet every year at the Harvest Drive in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. That's Pennsylvania Dutch country. And this is where I know that church folks stole. Because the deacons would bring plastics and take all the sausage. These are church people and steal from the buffet. Deacon boy, you know that ain't right. Well, give me one too. And I remember, these banquets, they always serve iced tea. And I remember as a kid putting the sugar in the tea. And when I tasted the tea, it still didn't have no flavor. And our Sunday school teacher, Miss Mary Martinez, said, Rashad, you got to stir it up. Or your sugar is going to sit at the bottom and you won't get no flavor. You got to stir it first. Maybe our problem is we have the right seasoning and spice, but we haven't been stirred up yet.
That's right. Amen.
We got to stir up love and stir up justice and stir up equality and stir up compassion, love, and good deeds. That's why the Galatians writer says, don't grow weary in doing what is right. For in due season, I like fall, I like winter, I like spring, I like summer. But my favorite season is due season. That when God pays you back in which you didn't even sow, God brings you a harvest. Due season. We stir each other into love and good works. And secondly, we don't just get informed, we get involved. It says not neglecting to meet together as some make it a habit. That's a major shade in the Bible. It says some people who think they're better than us and don't want to be with us. And they don't understand that the way the enemy attacks us the best is when we're isolated. I'm not a military person, but we have enough in our church, and I know one of the stories that always be told, that's always told by our military people in our church, they say, we have a greater survival rate when we all stick together. I think it's the book of Amos that says, when 2 are together, how can 2 walk together unless they be agreed?
Right.
So unity and community is God's gift to us. And we can't neglect meeting together. Now, we ain't got to be with each other all the time. But we got to make sure in those moments when we come together, we don't come together to just rehearse the tradition, but we come to be inspired and experienced by God's power.
Amen.
Don't neglect meeting together. There's some people who have every excuse not to come to church, but go everywhere else.
Amen.
There's hypocrites down at the grocery store. They lie at the club. You go in there. So you might as well come into the house of the God where imperfect people are trying to serve a perfect God. Just get in where you fit in. We all are a work in progress. Even those of us who preach, we all trying to work this thing out. That's why we ought to be thankful for God's grace. Grace is the eraser in our life. When I was in 6th grade, Miss Scott kicked me out and put me in the hall. And she said, I'm going to give you a detention. I said, okay. She said, write 30 times on the board, I will not speak out in class. And I wrote it, but she was taking so long to come back, I erased it. I said, Miss Scott, I wrote. She said, no, I don't see the evidence. She said, well, you use the eraser. She said, that's what the eraser does. It wipes away the evidence of what you did. Yeah. I never knew what she was saying, but 20 years later, I understand that that's what grace is. Grace is the eraser. And it wipes away the evidence of everything we did. And you can say, yeah, I did it, but God erased it. I was there, but God erased it. I did it, but God wiped the guilt away. Now I can say, I stand in God's authority and power, not guilty. We don't understand the power of each other's stories if we don't come together. And lastly, I bored you long enough. I told you we're in this together. We get informed, we get involved, but lastly, we get inspired. It says, but encouraging one another. And all the more as you see the day is drawing near. In those days in the first century church, they thought that the day of the Lord was coming any day. That's all they talked about. Well, it didn't come, so I'm going to remix it. The day is just not when the Lord comes back. I believe the day is approaching where we can be blessed. I believe the day of our healing is coming. I believe the day of prosperity is approaching. Do I have a witness this morning? The day of coming together and starting a new relationship is coming. You ought to thank God that your day is approaching. Anybody want to give God praise for that day? Hallelujah. We have some dark days, but a new day is coming. God is going to wipe our tears away, make ways out of no ways, make house out of no house, be a bridge over our troubled waters, be water when we're thirsty, and bread when I feel like I'm upstairs, bread when we're hungry. Do I have a witness today? We ought to get inspired and encourage each other. Say, sister, your day is coming. Brother, your day is coming. Hang on in there, because we're in this thing together. I close with this. Martin Luther King was having a difficult time being the leader of the Montgomery bus boycott. And he didn't speak well at one of the meetings. And one of the mothers of the movement, who was 90 years old, who walked 2 miles to her domestic job because she refused to ride the bus like everybody else. Mother Pollard said, boy, you got to know that we's with you. She said, my feet may be tired, but my soul is rested. And she said, if you don't believe we's with you, you got to know that God is with you. I'm here to let you know, when you don't believe nobody's with you, God got your back. Those who walk through valleys and shadows of death, the Lord is with you. Sometimes in our lives, we all have pains. We all have sorrows. But if we are wise, we know that there is always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. For it won't be too long. I'm going to need, do I have a witness? Somebody to lean on. Bill said, you just call on me, brother and sister, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you understand. Do you need somebody to lean on? If that ain't holy enough for you, tell somebody, I need you. I need you. You need me. We're all a part of God's army. Stand with me. Agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It is God's will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. Pray for me. I'll pray for you. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I need you to survive. Yes, Lord. We're in this thing together. Hallelujah. God bless you.